I don't usually post here, but this whole situation has been eating at me for months. I'm starting to feel like the biggest idiot on the planet, and I need to get this off my chest. So, if you've ever wondered what it's like to be your family's personal ATM, buckle up. Here's the deal. I'm 30, single, no kids, just your average guy living a normal life. My younger sister, Jessica, 26, is the complete opposite. She's all about the big dreams, the perfect Instagram life, the fairy tale ending. Last year, she got engaged to this guy, Chris, 28. He seemed cool at first, though I didn't really know him that well. Chris is the type who always has some grand scheme that's going to make him millions, but it never quite pans out. He bounces between jobs and spends whatever little money he earns on the latest tech, random hobbies, and nights out, instead of, paying rent. Jessica always laughed it off, saying, "That's just Chris being Chris," but it rubbed me the wrong way, and honestly, he never seemed to have a problem with me picking up their tab whenever they were short on cash. In fact, it felt like he expected it. Growing up, Jessica was the golden child. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. If she wanted something, they'd move mountains to get it for her, whether it was a last-minute party, a new phone, or even covering her tuition when she blew through her savings. Me? I was the responsible one. Never asked for much, never needed help, and always picked up the slack. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. When Jessica announced her engagement, my parents acted like she'd cured cancer. I was happy for her, of course, but the way they carried on, you'd think she'd single-handedly solved world hunger. Then came the wedding planning. It started innocently enough. My mom called me one evening, all casual, saying Jessica wanted to chat about the wedding. I figured she wanted advice on venues or something, or just someone to gush to about how perfect everything was going to be. But then my mom hesitated. "Actually," she said, "we thought it would be better to talk now, together." That was red flag number one. My mom isn't one to beat around the bush unless it's something she knows I won't like. So, I asked her what was up. "Well," she started, "you know how much this wedding means to Jessica. She's been dreaming about it forever, and she really wants it to be special." "Of course," I said. "I'm happy for her." There was a pause. "She's got so many ideas," my mom continued, clearly stalling. "She's thinking about a live band, custom invitations, maybe even a little surprise for Chris during the ceremony. She's really putting her heart into it." Then she finally hit me with it. "But she added, her tone shifting, "weddings are expensive. She's doing her best, but there's only so much she can manage on her own. And well, we're a little tight right now, too." I knew where this was going. This wasn't about advice or gushing. This was about money. "So what are you saying?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Well," she said, "Jessica was hoping you might be able to help out a little." "Help out how?" I pressed. "Just with a few things here and there," she said vaguely, "like the venue deposit, or maybe part of the catering. Nothing too big." Yeah, right. This wasn't helping out, in the sense of lending a hand with decorations or picking up guests from the airport. This was financial help, the kind that wasn't going to be a little anything. "She really needs you," my mom added, "and you've always been so responsible. We knew we could count on you to make her dream come true." It wasn't a compliment, it was an expectation. I was expected to handle everything because I didn't have a family of my own to tie me down. That phrase made my blood boil every single time. I didn't say anything for a minute, partly because I was speechless, and partly because I was already calculating how much this was going to cost me. "I'll think about it," I finally said, trying not to commit to anything. "Great," my mom said quickly, like she'd just closed a deal. "I'll let Jessica know you're on board. This is going to mean so much to her." At first, it didn't sound so bad. "Just the venue deposit," my mom had said. "It's just a little something to get things rolling." But here's the thing about saying yes once. It never stops. First, it was the deposit. Then it was the caterer, then the flowers, the photographer, the live band, and even the dress. I'm not kidding when I say her dress cost more than my car. I wanted to say no, but it was too late. Family supports family, my mom would chime in every single time. This is such a big moment for her. Don't you want her to have the wedding she's always dreamed of? By the end of it, I'd spent $50,000. Yeah, 50 grand. I drained my savings, maxed out a credit card, and picked up extra shifts at work to make it happen. All for one day. Every time I wrote another check, I told myself it was for Jessica's happiness. But with each payment, I felt a piece of myself slipping away. Was this what family was supposed to feel like? Sacrificing everything while they took it all for granted. A week before the wedding, Jessica called me in a panic. "The band we wanted just raised their rates," she said, her voice frantic. "I know you've already helped so much, but could you cover the difference? It's only $2,000, and I'll pay you back." Well, she never did. But by then, I was too deep in to back out. I told myself it was just one last thing. What's another $2,000 after $48,000? But deep down, I knew the money was gone for good. The wedding itself was beautiful. Jessica looked like a princess, and everyone had a great time. Everyone except me. As I arrived at the venue, my mom cornered me immediately. "Make sure you're around to help with the kids during the reception," she said, as if I wasn't already doing enough. It hit me then. I wasn't just a guest at this wedding, I was the unpaid staff. And as I sat at a table in the back, watching everyone else have fun, I wondered why I'd ever agreed to any of this. After the wedding, I thought I could finally breathe again. I figured Jessica and Chris would settle into their new life, and I could start focusing on rebuilding my savings. I mean, I'd done my part, right? Wrong. The first sign that things weren't over came about a month later when Jessica called. "Hey, big brother," she said. "I hate to ask, but we're running a little tight this month. Could you help us out with rent?" I froze. "What do you mean you're running tight? Didn't you just get a bunch of money from the wedding gifts?" "Oh, well, yeah," she said, laughing like it was no big deal. "But we used most of that for the honeymoon and, other stuff." I wanted to say no right then and there, but I hesitated. Jessica sounded so casual about it, like it was just something brothers did. And once again, she pulled the "you're my big brother" card. So I caved. I sent her enough to cover their rent for that month, convincing myself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. The requests kept coming. Rent one month, utility bills the next. At one point, she even asked me to cover a car payment because Chris had a slow week at work. Every time I started to push back, she'd get upset. "You're acting like this is a big deal," she'd say. "You know we're good for it." But they weren't. I never saw a penny of that money again. The worst part was that Jessica didn't even seem grateful. I'd see her on social media, posting pictures of fancy dinners, weekend trips, and new outfits. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen noodles and working double shifts just to keep my head above water. I tried to justify it to myself. This is temporary, I thought. She's my sister. She'll figure things out eventually. But deep down, I was starting to feel like an ATM. And then came the family dinner. The one that changed everything. Family dinners were supposed to be casual, a chance to eat some good food, catch up, and laugh a little. But this one was anything but. I don't know why I even went. My parents had been hounding me about coming, saying stuff like, "It's been too long since we all sat down together," and "Jessica and Chris will be there, won't it be nice to catch up?" I wasn't thrilled. I'd been avoiding family stuff for a while, trying to dodge the endless guilt trips and money requests. But eventually I gave in. I told myself, how bad could it be? When I walked into my parents' house, the atmosphere wasn't warm or welcoming. It felt weirdly tense. Jessica and Chris were already sitting at the dining table, looking way too comfortable, like they owned the place. "Hey, big spender," Jessica said as soon as she saw me, and I swear I felt my blood pressure spike. "Jessica," I said, forcing a smile. "Chris." I sat down, trying to keep my cool. The small talk started, mostly my mom and Jessica chatting about random stuff. Her hair appointment, Chris's new shoes, the weather. I just sat there. "So," my dad said finally, looking at me, "how's work?" "Busy," I said. It was the truth, but I didn't feel like elaborating. Yeah, Jessica added, smirking. I don't know how you do it. All those hours, all that stress, I'd be exhausted. Chris chuckled. Seriously, dude, you're like a machine, always working, never stopping. Makes me tired just thinking about it. I clenched my jaw. I could feel my nerves fraying, but I told myself to let it go. It wasn't worth it. Halfway through dinner, Jessica casually dropped a bomb. So Chris and I have been thinking about buying a house. My parents' faces lit up. Oh, that's wonderful, my mom said. A house? That's such a big step. Yeah, Jessica said. We've been looking at a few places, but houses aren't cheap. We'll definitely need some help with the down payment. She said it so casually, like it was no big deal. I didn't say anything at first, just nodded, waiting to see if she'd elaborate. But of course, she didn't. She just looked at me expectantly, like I should know what she meant. My mom chimed in. It's such a great time to buy a house, though. Interest rates aren't terrible, and they found this cute little place they love. I still didn't bite. I just kept quiet, pretending to focus on my plate. But they kept going. Jessica leaned in, a little impatient now. We're just so close to making it work, We've been saving, but with with Chris. I should have started connecting the dots. You've always been so good with your job and everything, she continued. We've just hit a bit of a wall. My mom nodded, giving me that be supportive of Jessica look. This would really mean so much to her. Finally, I sighed and looked up at them. I just spent $50,000 on your wedding, I said, staring directly at Jessica. Don't you think it's time you figured things out on your own? Jessica's smile disappeared. Wow, way to ruin the mood, she said. Seriously, Chris added, shaking his head. It's not like we're asking for millions. We thought you'd be happy to help. She leaned back in her chair, looking like she'd just won a prize. It's not like you have kids or anything. You don't really have responsibilities like the rest of us. The way she said it, so casual and dismissive, made my blood boil. My entire life had been one responsibility after another, but to her, I was just the guy with no real problems, who could be her backup plan. You think I don't have responsibilities? I said, barely keeping my voice steady. Who do you think has been paying for all of yours? That's when Jessica dropped the dagger. Maybe if you weren't such a loser, you wouldn't be so bitter about helping family. Loser. All these years, I'd bent over backward for this family, and now she was sitting there calling me a loser like everything I'd sacrificed didn't matter. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. As I stared at her smug expression, I wanted to turn the house upside down to lash out, but for a second, all I could do was sit there, frozen by the sheer audacity of it all. Was this really how they saw me? I glanced at my parents, searching for some sign of outrage or even discomfort. But my mom just sipped her water, her eyes fixed on the table like she hadn't heard a thing. My dad ignored everything completely, disengaged. Their silence was deafening, an unspoken agreement with Jessica's words. They weren't just ignoring her, they were endorsing her. My hands clenched into fists under the table. I couldn't stay silent. A loser, huh? Funny. Coming from someone who's been riding my sacrifices like a free carnival ride for years. You think it's easy being treated like the family piggy bank while you sit back and judge. You know what? Yes, I am such a loser. Now it's time you figured out your own damn life. Without one. Let's see how far you get. Jessica's smirk faltered, just a flicker, but I caught it. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was thick with tension. You're being dramatic, my mom finally said. We're family, we help each other. I felt something snap inside me. Help each other? I said, standing up. All I've ever done is help. I've drained my savings, maxed out my credit cards, and worked myself to exhaustion for you. And now you want more. I'm done. I'm not your bank account. Figure it out yourselves. Jessica looked stunned for a moment. Wow! You're really going to act like this after everything I've been through? You're so selfish. That's so messed up, man, Chris added. Why are you so angry? We're not asking for much, just a little help. You're sitting there in your $300 sneakers, eating food I paid for, and you want to lecture me about messed up? I shot back. $50,000 wasn't much? Covering your rent, your bills, your entire life? It's not enough. What more do you want? My soul? My mom looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. My dad just stared at his plate. I'm done, I said again, throwing my napkin onto the table and grabbing my coat. Don't call me, don't text me, and definitely don't ask me for money to pay your... I trailed off, my voice cold. I didn't wait for a response. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off their stunned silence. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. With that, I walked out, leaving them to sit in the mess they'd created. I drove home that night in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I wasn't angry anymore, I was hurt. Hurt that my own family, the people who were supposed to have my back, saw me as nothing more than a wallet. And the next morning, my phone blew up. Jessica had sent me a series of texts ranging from passive-aggressive to outright insulting. Thanks for ruining dinner, by the way. You're seriously going to leave your own sister hanging? Wow, you're such a bitter, selfish person. No wonder you're alone. I didn't reply. I wasn't going to engage in her pity party or her insults. Then my mom called. I let it go to voicemail, but the notification popped up almost immediately. Honey, it's Mom. We need to talk. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to apologize to Jessica. She's been so upset since last night. Right, of course, I was the one who needed to apologize. The next voicemail was from my dad. You went too far. That was uncalled for. Jessica's been through a lot, and you just walked out like that. You're better than this. Better than what exactly? I didn't call him back either. But Jessica didn't stop there. A GoFundMe link popped up in my feed. Yep, Jessica had started a crowdfunding campaign for her down payment. The title, Help Us Build Our Future. The description, a sob story about how unexpected circumstances had left them in need. She didn't name me directly, but anyone who knew our family could read between the lines. She raised a grand total of $75. I won't lie, I laughed harder than I had in weeks. I wanted to send her a message saying, maybe try being a decent person, it's free, but I figured it wasn't worth the energy. Things got even worse when I got a call from Jessica's landlord. Apparently, she'd stopped paying her rent and told him I'd cover it. She said you've always handled her bills, he said. She lied, I told him flatly. She's not my problem anymore. He didn't seem surprised. I guess even her landlord knew she was full of it. Then, because Jessica can never just let something go, she showed up at my apartment. She must have buzzed my doorbell 10 times before I finally answered, already exhausted. She looked upset, the whole dramatic act. You can't just cut me off, she said. I'm your sister. Yes, I can, I replied. Her expression shifted from desperation to anger. How am I supposed to pay rent? Or buy groceries? Or... Figure it out, I interrupted. Get a job, make a budget, do what the rest of us do. I have a job, she snapped. Then maybe stop spending all your money on designer clothes and takeout, I shot back. You're not my responsibility, Jessica. I've done more than enough. You're being cruel, she said, tears starting to form. No, I said firmly. I'm being honest. You've taken advantage of me for years. I'm done. I shut the door before she could say anything else. I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me again. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer, but then I got a notification. I'd been served. Turns out, Jessica was suing me. Jessica had a knack for getting her way. If you hesitated, she'd either guilt you or twist the story to make you the bad guy. Like the time she convinced my cousin to skip a family trip because her kids would be too disruptive, only to turn around and call her selfish for not attending. I didn't see it then, but looking back, I should have known. If Jessica wanted something, she'd find a way to make you give it to her. I should have seen the lawsuit coming. Jessica's claim was ridiculous. She accused me of making a verbal agreement to support her financially and said I'd caused her emotional distress by cutting her off. She even had fake screenshots of text messages where I supposedly promised to pay her bills. I couldn't believe it. My own sister was dragging me to court because I wouldn't bankroll her life anymore. My parents, of course, were on her side. "This wouldn't have happened if you just worked things out with her," my mom said. "She's desperate and you're making it worse by being stubborn," my dad added. "Stubborn?" I shot back. "She's suing me because I won't give her money. How is that okay?" "Just settle," my mom said. "It'll make things easier for everyone." "No," I said. "I'm not giving her a dime." So, I hired a lawyer, and we prepared to fight. The case was a circus. Jessica played the victim perfectly, telling the judge how she'd relied on my promises and how my betrayal had left her struggling. But my lawyer tore her case apart. We presented receipts for every expense I'd covered, from the venue deposit to her dress. We showed how much money I'd already spent on her wedding, rent, and bills. And when Jessica's fake screenshots came up, my lawyer pointed out the inconsistencies. The judge wasn't impressed with her lies. He dismissed the case, and Jessica was slapped with a fine for wasting the court's time. Afterward, my parents tried to guilt me again. "You didn't have to take it that far," my mom said. "She's your sister." "She sued me," I replied. "What did you expect me to do? Roll over and hand her more money?" They didn't have an answer. Here's where I am right now. I don't know what to expect, but things are not settling down yet, and I'm already exhausted with everything going on. I'll keep you guys updated. Update 1. Hey guys, here's an update. So after the lawsuit, I thought things might finally settle down. Jessica had embarrassed herself. My parents were out of excuses, and I was ready to move on. But if you've been keeping up, you already know my family doesn't work like that. Jessica, of course, wasn't content to leave things alone either. She started posting even more on social media, painting herself as the victim of a heartless sibling. She didn't name me outright, but the posts were painfully obvious. And her friends, who clearly didn't know the full story, flooded the comments with sympathy. "You deserve so much better," one wrote. Another added, "Some people just don't have a heart." But the worst was yet to come. The other day I got a call from my aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in months. "So," she said, her voice hesitant, "I heard you're refusing to help Jessica anymore. What's going on?" I sighed. "What did she tell you?" "That you abandoned her after the wedding," my aunt replied. "She said you promised to support her and then just stopped." I couldn't believe it. Jessica wasn't just playing the victim, she was rewriting history. "That's not what happened," I explained, walking my aunt through everything. The wedding, the rent, the bills, the lawsuit. By the end, she was quiet. "I had no idea," she finally said. "She made it sound like you just walked away for no reason." "Yeah, well, that's her version," I said. "I'm done explaining myself, though. If people want to believe her lies, that's on them." The breaking point came a few months later when my parents called me together, which was rare. "We need to talk," my mom said. "About what?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "It's Jessica," my dad said. She's in trouble again." "Of course she is," I muttered. "What now?" "She maxed out our credit cards," my mom blurted out. "We didn't know until the bills came. We can't make the payments, and the interest is piling up." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why would you give her access to your credit cards?" "She said it was just for groceries and gas," my dad said, sounding more defeated than angry. "We didn't think she'd—" "You didn't think?" I interrupted. "After everything she's done, you didn't think she'd take advantage of you? Are you serious?" "She's our daughter," my mom said, her tone defensive. "And I'm your son," I shot back. "But that hasn't stopped you from treating me like nothing more than a paycheck." My mom sounded like she was on the verge of tears. "We just thought maybe you could help us out. Just this once. We're drowning here, and Jessica, she's not in a good place." "No," I said, my voice firm. "This is your mess. You enabled her. You let her walk all over you, and now you're dealing with the consequences. I'm not bailing you out." "Please," my dad said. "We'll pay you back." "No." I cut him off. "I'm done. Don't call me again unless it's to apologize. I blocked Jessica on everything: social media, my phone, email. I stopped answering my parents' calls. I even told a few close friends to stop updating me on the family drama. I was done. I felt like I was going to cut them all off and be relieved from all this crap. I'll keep you updated. Hey again. I'm back with another update since you all asked for it. After that phone call with my parents, I knew it was over. Whatever thread was holding our family together had officially snapped. I'd spent years bending over backward for Jessica, and for what? More entitlement, more guilt trips, more people telling me I wasn't doing enough. I blocked their numbers and made the conscious decision to move on. At first, it felt weird. Cutting off your family isn't something most people plan for. I had this nagging voice in my head saying, what if they're right? What if I am the selfish one? But then I'd remember everything I'd done for them, all the times I said yes when I wanted to say no, all the sacrifices I made while Jessica kept living like money grew on trees. And that voice, it got quieter. But Jessica, she wasn't ready to let go. About 2 weeks after I cut ties, I got an email from a mutual friend. Let's call her Emily. Emily said she'd been at a family gathering, not mine, thankfully, where Jessica was holding court, telling everyone how I'd abandoned her. She's really laying it on thick, Emily wrote. She told everyone you promised to help with her rent, her bills, even a house down payment, and then just ghosted her. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. Of course, Jessica was spinning the story. She couldn't admit the truth, that she'd bled me dry and I finally had enough. Emily also mentioned that Jessica had been calling extended family members asking for money. She's desperate, Emily said. I think she thought the lawsuit would scare you into caving. Well, it didn't. And then finally came the cherry on top. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hi, the voice said hesitantly. It was Jessica. What do you want? I asked. She sniffed like she'd been crying. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I paused. This was unexpected. Go on, I said. She took a deep breath. I know I've been difficult, and I know I've asked for a lot, but I'm really struggling, and I don't know what to do. I sighed. Jessica, I've been telling you for years that you need to figure things out for yourself. You can't keep relying on other people to bail you out. I know, she said quickly. I know, but I'm trying. It's just hard. I could hear the manipulation creeping back into her voice. The apology wasn't real. It was just a new tactic to get me to cave. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, my tone firm. But I'm not going to fix this for you. You've made your choices, now you have to live with them. She didn't like that answer. You're being so cold, she snapped. How can you just turn your back on me like this? Because I've spent my whole life cleaning up your messes, I replied. And I'm done. Goodbye, Jessica. I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her. It's been months since I cut ties with Jessica and my parents, and honestly, it's been the most peaceful time of my life. No guilt trips, no frantic calls for money. I've started rebuilding my savings, and for the first time, I'm thinking about what I want for my future. Jessica, from what I've heard through the grapevine, is still living with my parents. She's burned through their savings and maxed out every option they gave her. They're struggling, but I can't say I feel sorry for them. They created this mess by enabling her for so long. As for me, I finally bought my own house. It's small, nothing fancy, but it's mine. No one can take it from me, and no one can guilt me into sacrificing it for their needs. I've learned something important after all of this. Family isn't about DNA. It's about mutual respect, love, and boundaries. If those aren't there, then you're just enabling toxicity. I may have lost my family, but I've gained something far more valuable. Peace. They weren't invited to the housewarming, and they probably never will be. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Here's to moving forward. Story 2. In addition to ruining my baby shower, my toxic mother-in-law also claims to be the biological mother of my child, and was even jailed for her outlandish conduct. I'm a 29-year-old woman who is married to my amazing spouse Gary and is expecting our first kid. Thus far, the adventure has been really thrilling. I've known Gary for a long time, and we were married 4 years ago. We were ecstatic to learn that I was pregnant 6 months ago, since I had been trying to conceive since previous year. Together, we have experienced life's highs and lows. Our relationship has been much more joyful since learning that a child is on the way. We are eager to meet our little nugget, and each day gets us one step closer. From the excitement of finding out to the wonderful times when you can feel your baby kicking your tummy, pregnancy has been an emotional roller coaster for me. Gary has been my pillar of support over this entire ordeal. He has attended all of his doctor's appointments. He's even helping to build up a gorgeous nursery for our soon-to-be kid, and we read parenting books together. Right now, we're acting like babies, discussing names, furnishing the nursery, and formulating future plans. It makes me happy that Gary is so thrilled to become a father. He is all with splitting the cost of preparing for the baby. As we prepare to welcome our little one, we are relishing every moment of pregnancy, including its pleasure and hardships. We made the decision 2 months ago to inform our family of the wonderful news of my pregnancy. Before sharing the happiness with our loved ones, we made sure we had reached the important first trimester milestone, and were quite positive. For lunch, we had invited all of our parents and close relatives. They came anticipating a typical meal, but their faces changed to ones of delight and awe when they saw how much I was eating. When my mother saw me and realized I was pregnant, she broke down in tears. She was thrilled to be a grandma soon, and understood why we had kept the news a secret. She said she was thrilled to be a grandma soon, and fully understood why we had kept it a secret. Barbara, Gary's mother, on the other hand, reacted very differently. When she found out that we had concealed the pregnancy, she became enraged rather than join in the celebration. She directly accused me of purposefully leaving her out because she felt excluded. I tried to explain the rationale for our choice, but she remained irate and wouldn't talk to me anymore. What should have been a happy family occasion was marred by her criticism. Barbara never spoke to me again during the night. She was disrespectful, not just to me but to my mother as well, who had always been nothing but nice to her in their past interactions. Barbara was silent throughout conversations, engrossed on her phone as the rest of the family participated in the get-togethers. She was obviously agitated, and her dissatisfaction was evident. She freely admitted to everyone that she was unaware of my pregnancy, which made her feel as though she had wasted valuable time with an unborn grandchild. Her dissatisfaction was seen by my husband and one of his siblings. I approached a breaking point as the strain increased, and made the decision to take a little break to collect myself. When my mother saw that I was upset, she came to console me until I was calm enough to go back. At the end of the night, Barbara purposefully chose to bid me farewell last. She hardly spoke to me other than to say hello and goodbye, after spending the entire day staring at me with critical eyes from my parents, sister, and husband. My husband later escorted him to the car, where they got into a furious quarrel that I could obviously hear from where I was in the foyer. The tension situation worsened when Barbara used the occasion to air her grievances against me. Fortunately, at this time, everyone had departed, leaving me alone. Gary and his parents, as well as mine. She informed him furiously that I didn't think about family at all, and that she couldn't believe I had the gall to withhold my pregnancy from her. With composure, my husband informed her that he and I had agreed to hold off on telling everyone the news until we were safely out of danger. When Barbara heard this, she began to shout. Their talk proceeded as follows. "We are referring to our grandson here. I should have known from the start. It's not about whether you deserve it, Mom. We came to that choice collectively. Or perhaps she simply want to exercise caution. Wary? Her mother-in-law is me. This is something she ought to have trusted me with. It's all her fault." My spouse became irate at this point. So far, he had kept himself in check. However, I saw his face flush with rage as he heard his mother accuse me again. He adamantly informed his mother that he was equally accountable for the choice, so if she was criticizing me, she should also blame him. He persisted in telling her to quit overreacting and move on from this, Barbara advised him to open his eyes because he was giving me too much power, and because, as his mother, she ought to have been the first to find out if her son was expecting a grandchild. He told her that he loved her, but that she should go and calm down before saying anything she would later regret. My husband refused to back down and urged her to stop hitting me. I didn't realize I was crying as Barbara hurried off, leaving my husband standing there looking clearly disappointed and irritated by his mother's response. I was upset and confused by the acerbic nature of her statements. As soon as he saw how upset I was, Gary came running to console me and led me back inside the home. Seeing the strain, my parents politely remained until I was emotionally calm and comforted. Barbara didn't stop there either. She sent me a message later that evening, and I became anxious as I awaited what it would include. "I must say, I'm really disappointed in you," she wrote in her message. "You purposefully withheld a crucial piece of information from me, and I cannot forgive you for that. It's unbelievable that you would deprive me of the happiness that comes with learning about my grandchild right away. This is insulting and cruel, and that is not how a family should function. Rather of expressing regret for your immature behavior, you are now dividing my son and myself. I'm ashamed of you." Her comments pierced me, and I couldn't help but feel wounded and angry at the same time. Gary was furious when I showed him the note. He blamed me directly since he couldn't understand why his mother would respond in such a bad way. Gary made the decision to give her a call and cautioned her from sending such depressing texts, since they would make me even more upset. He even threatened to cut her off if she kept acting in this way. Barbara appeared to be affected by Gary's remarks and his irate tone. When she realized she could be disconnected, she adjusted her tone. She offered a remedy rather than admitting her own part in the dispute. She said that if we let her host a baby shower for us, it would be the only way she could forgive us for what she felt was an insult. We were both taken aback by this unexpected development and began to doubt her intentions. She persisted in pleading, stating that nothing would make her happier than to plan a lavish party for me and her grandchild, in which she would handle every detail. Gary gave me a questioning look, but I don't believe him. Barbara's abrupt change of heart didn't seem like a sincere attempt at reconciliation, but rather a calculated maneuver to reclaim power and demonstrate her supremacy. Despite my misgivings, Gary constantly tries to maintain harmony and find a middle ground. Embrace the possibility of taking her offer. I conveyed my worries to Gary, emphasizing that if I accepted her offer, it may further reinforce her sense that her actions were acceptable. Gary acknowledged my viewpoint, but he expressed his hope that by letting his mother host a baby shower for me, we might patch things up and make the family more cohesive before the baby was born. I reluctantly consented, and Gary told his mom to start organizing my baby shower. She was ecstatic and thanked them for letting her be in control. Even though I had given her the task, I had expected that there would be some cooperation, that she would ask about my opinion and take my tastes into account for my own baby shower. With a month to go until the event, in the upcoming weeks, I expected more thorough preparation to take place, but I was shocked to learn that my mother-in-law had lost her mind. Without asking me or anybody else, she decided to buy all the decorations, pick the games, and organize the events. My mother-in-law merely told her that everything had been agreed, and that it would be a surprise for me when my mother contacted her to discuss the baby shower. I was disappointed and irritated by the lack of communication and thoughtfulness, because the event that was supposed to commemorate a happy occasion was now being planned without taking my preferences or desires into account. There was a mixture of nervousness and excitement in the air on the day of my baby shower. My close friends were excited to celebrate the impending birth of our child when I arrived at the location, a nearby banquet hall. I was immediately drawn to my mother-in-law's outlandish decorations as soon as I came in. Every nook and cranny was decorated with a sea of beige and brown balloons, illustrating a theme that she had completely invented. The decorations, which seemed like a botched effort at a safari motif, were something I detested. The lively mood I had imagined for the party was in stark contrast to the overpowering presence of brown and gray. For my baby shower, I had envisioned delicate touches and pastel colors, but my mother-in-law obviously had the opposite idea. When I noticed a striking exhibit close to the entrance, a huge banner with an intricate collage of my husband's newborn photos with Barbara, the tension in the air increased. At my baby shower, everyone stared at it, perplexed, unable to comprehend why she had chosen to present my husband's newborn photos. I gave her a curious look, but she dismissed it with a chuckle, stating that she was quite pleased of my husband's cuteness as a youngster, and that she anticipated our child to look just like him, so she wanted to show it off to everyone. I gazed at her, attempting to understand whether or not she had truly gone insane. She was obviously trying to focus the day more on her own motherhood experiences than on the impending arrival to our family. As additional visitors started to show up, their looks varied from bewilderment to courteous unease. Looking around the room, the sea of beige and brown balloons and the tall banner featuring my husband and mother-in-law produced an atmosphere that was far different from the sophisticated and festive setting I had in mind for my baby shower. I looked sorry at a few of my pals who obviously felt the same way. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief as she entered, witnessing the utter terror my mother-in-law had let loose on the venue. She immediately fixed her gaze on the banner, and I could feel her shock at the foolishness of displaying a collage that, rather than commemorating the birth of my kid, appeared to be more of an exhibition of my husband's early years. With audacity, my mother approached the flag. Without a word, her face changed from one of incredulity to one of resolve, and she seized the flag forcefully, pulling it from its conspicuous display. All eyes went to my mother as she removed the obtrusive exhibit that had overpowered the celebration, and the room grew silent. I couldn't help but be overwhelmed with appreciation for my mother's steadfast support. My mother-in-law looked horrified as she spoke to other visitors, observing my mom toss the banner into the trash can. "What do you think you're doing?" she questioned in a critical tone. That banner was a unique way to honor the family's new baby. Unfazed by the criticism, my mother spoke in a calm but forceful tone. "This is not a celebration of your accomplishments. Rather, it is about my daughter and her baby." This unexpected clash attracted the attention of the visitors surrounding them. My mother-in-law attempted to restore control of the situation after seeing the change in focus. I figured it would be good for everyone to know who is in charge of this lovely occasion. "I wanted everyone to see how adorable Gary was as a kid, because I was in charge of organizing this beautiful celebration," she shot back, trying to hide her irritation. My mother persisted, unfazed. "Barbara, you pleaded with my daughter to let you host this baby shower for her in spite of your previous behavior against her. This is a forum for your own agenda and my daughter's baby shower. Or try to take center stage." As the conversation progressed, the room fell silent, and visitors looked at one another uneasily. With a false smile, my mother-in-law withdrew and resumed talking to other guests after recognizing that her attempt to control the topic had failed. After that, the baby shower went on, and I did my best to concentrate on the good vibes coming from my loved ones. I assumed there wouldn't be any more surprises for my mother-in-law, who appeared to be drinking a bit too much for a baby shower, even if there was tension that persisted throughout the occasion. However, there was nothing I could say to her. The visitors appeared to be gradually beginning to enjoy themselves as we played a variety of party games. I was pleasantly impressed by everyone's considerate presence for my baby. When it came time for the gift opening session, my excitement quickly gave way to confusion, though, as my mother-in-law gave me an oversized present package while grinning wildly. A rush of shame and fury washed over me as the room went quiet. My mom gave her a fierce look. Unsure of how to respond to this sudden development, the visitors exchanged uncomfortable looks in an effort to ease the tension and avoid making things more unpleasant. I forced a meek grin and thanked her for the considerate present. I was fighting the impulse to roll my eyes the entire time. When it came time for the cake-cutting ritual, things got much more heated. Over-the-top decorations and a lavish tiered cake were purchased by my mother-in-law. She clinked her glass to get everyone's attention and made a great show of it. I was wondering what she was up to now and was becoming a little irritated. We all gave her a questioning glance and waited for her to say something. Then Barbara said that she had thought of the ideal name for our daughter. As I heard her words, I froze. Remember that we ourselves hadn't decided on a name. With a name that seems like it belongs in a Victorian romance, she proudly announced that the child will be called after her great-grandmother. She thought she had the naming rights, which startled and slightly annoyed me. I stepped in and gently explained that my husband and I wanted to choose the name for our child jointly. As parents, we wanted to make that decision. But my mother-in-law will have none of it. She maintained that she had the ideal name, and that since she had spent so much money on the baby shower, I should accept it if I was a nice daughter-in-law. Her feeling of entitlement astounded me. Regardless of who threw the baby shower, I made it clear that my husband and I alone had the authority to choose the baby's name. My mother-in-law then began shouting at me in front of everyone, saying I was being very rude and that I should be thankful for everything she had done. She continued to be critical of my upbringing, arguing that rather than denying her the right to name the child, I ought to be giving her credit. Barbara became more hostile and began pointing fingers at my face. My mother intervened, forming a barrier in front of me. Barbara persisted in her yelling, claiming to be the biological mother of my child since she gave birth to my husband and I became pregnant using his sperm. Her remarks were very repulsive. My mom tried to halt Barbara's hurtful remarks, but that just made her angrier. She persisted in disparaging me and said that my mother had raised me poorly. She had obviously consumed too much alcohol, so it was useless to try to reason with her. Everyone was feeling uneasy as things continued to worsen. As the situation worsened, I decided I had had enough of being humiliated in an attempt to maintain my dignity. Leaving behind the gift my mother-in-law had given me, I made the decision to leave with the presents my friends had kindly provided. But Barbara, inebriated, grabbed the presents from me and threw them on the floor, calling me a witch and ungrateful for interfering with her son connection. In an attempt to control the turmoil, I saw several individuals beginning to video the situation as the tense environment attracted greater attention. I requested a good friend of mine to kindly ask everyone to leave the gathering. Unfazed, Barbara kept making vile charges about me, making a spectacle that nobody could have predicted when they came for what should have been a festive event. Anger overcame my frustration, and as a final choice, I called the police to get her out of my area. Her violent actions were beginning to make me feel really frightened. Yes, you read correctly. Because of my toxic mother-in-law, I had to call the cops to my own baby shower. Barbara went into full theatrical mode when the authorities arrived, accusing me of being the mastermind behind the crazy incident and pointing fingers at me. Fortunately, the police were kind and tried to talk sense into her head. But because she was intoxicated, my mother-in-law fought their attempts and even began shouting at the cops, which didn't help her case. She was immediately detained once the scene became so heated. Along with my mother and a few close friends, I left the gathering feeling unsettled by the disturbing situation. My spouse and I have been coping with the ramifications ever since this event. Since they don't reside in the same city, some family members who weren't at the baby shower are sympathetic to my mother-in-law, who is on a full-blown guilt trip and playing the victim card. My spouse believes I went too far, even though he can see why I contacted the police. He thinks I might have asked his father or him for assistance. So, kudos to EPA for contacting the police on my mother-in-law for sabotaging my baby shower and posing as the baby's real mother. Update 1. Since opting to share my baby shower, I've been blown away by the amount of feedback I've had. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who agreed with my decision to call the police. It was the most angry response I had ever seen from my mother-in-law. The degree of aggressiveness she demonstrated during the baby shower truly worried me about the risk of physical injury, especially considering the potential influence on my pregnant kid, as I typically only saw her around holidays and never spent much time with her. All of the attendees of the baby shower have contacted us to offer their support after the tragedy. I plan to show my husband the recordings of the entire fiasco that some of them have shared. In the upcoming weekend, I want to have a serious talk with him regarding his mother's future. Second update. I showed my spouse the recording. As previously said, I found myself sitting down with my spouse to have a serious discussion about what had happened. I gave him a thorough explanation of how his mother's actions had gotten worse during the whole situation. I detailed all of the ranting, accusations, and strange presents she gave, from the secret pregnancy announcement to the wild baby shower. After that, I showed him the tapes, which my husband watched with obvious horror. He appeared to have a reality check after watching the film, forcing him to face the upsetting reality of his mother's behavior. He began to really apologize to me for not realizing how serious the issue was and admitted that I was correct to contact the police. I didn't know. It got this awful. I'm so sorry you had to endure all of that. His expression was a mix of remorse and rage. Since this seemed so out of character for his mother, he acknowledged that he had never thought she could be so poisonous. He told me that he was on my side and that his main concerns were for my safety and well-being, particularly while I was pregnant. We then explored the underlying problems, talking about how his mother's desire for approval and control had clouded what ought to have been a happy moment. Gary expressed his own worries about his mother's behavior and admitted that it had gone too far as he struggled to accept the truth of what she had done. I informed him that I wanted to sever all connections with his mother because of the way she had treated me in public. I persisted in telling him that although he may date her if he so desired, I would not be involved in her life along with our child. At least until his mother's violent conduct prompted her to seek treatment. After hearing this, Gary said he was prepared to sever his relationship with his mother because of what she had done, which he found absolutely abhorrent. My husband claimed that his mother had the audacity to treat me disrespectfully, despite my assurances that he was not required to do so. She no longer had the right to be in our life as a result. He realized that his mother's actions could have been the result of long-standing problems rather than being limited to the baby shower. Gary has told me that he would personally inform his mother of our decision going forward, emphasizing that he has complete control over removing her from our life. I've also instructed him to let her know that I will have to call the police on her once more if she decides to show up at our door without warning and try to make me accept her return. It's been a month since I last gave everyone an update, and they asked how I and the baby were doing. As the day draws near, I am eager to meet my child. We haven't spoken to Barbara at all since my last update. Gary spoke with his parents, and his father promised to do all in his power to make sure my mother-in-law respects our choice and is aware of the limits we have established. Since we severed our relationship with Barbara, there has been a discernible change in our lives. Our home has a renewed sense of calm and quiet as a result of the absence of the ongoing drama and poisoning. With Barbara's interruptions no longer a threat, Gary and I can now concentrate on getting ready for the birth of our child. During this difficult time, the help that friends and family have given us has been tremendous. With their support and empathy, my parents and close friends have been pillars of strength. After seeing the startling events during the baby shower, even some family members who were previously ignorant of the severity of Barbara's actions have stepped out to offer their support. Our trip is far from done, as seen by the videos that have gone viral. However, this experience has deepened our relationship and made it clear how crucial it is to face obstacles as a team. Although the choice to break off contact with Barbara was not taken lightly, it has turned out to be essential for our welfare. Even if there could be some lasting difficulties, we are hopeful about the improvements this decision has made to our lives. We are committed to creating a caring and nurturing family atmosphere that puts the health of both parents and kid first as we anxiously anticipate the birth of our little one. Story 3. After breaking into my home to take my late mother's wedding gown at my envious stepsister's request, my dog attacked my soon-to-be brother-in-law. To be in the middle of a drama-filled catastrophe, including a breakup with a jealous stepsister, and the threat of legal action is rather unexpected for me, a 29-year-old woman. However, this is the recent course of my life, so allow me to give you a thorough summary of the tumultuous events that have occurred. To provide some context, the love story between my parents was like a corny romantic comedy that ended up becoming a scary movie. I was born at a very young age. As a result, they were unable to manage the stress of both their jobs and fatherhood. They finally got divorced as a result of their constant arguments. I was just out of my teens at the time. My parents always maintained a cordial relationship and made the decision to remain friendly for my sake. My mother found solace in the embrace of the guy she thought was her true love when I was a college student. Carlos will soon be my stepdad. She phoned to share the good news that they were engaged. I wasn't happy that she was getting married again, but I also understood that I had no right to meddle in her affairs or prevent her from being happy. Carlos and his stepdaughter Amelia who would soon become my stepsister, were introduced to me. I was never truly liked by Amelia at first. I couldn't understand why her mother had died so young, and it seemed like she thought I was a problem. Perhaps she thus believed that I was drawing attention away from her father, or perhaps she simply didn't like the thought of his being married to a parent. She treated me harshly every time we met, and treated me with contempt. She clearly did not want to accept my mother or myself. As a result, Amelia would frequently express her displeasure with the new family situation or data, making family get-togethers difficult, with forced smiles and awkward conversations. My mother did everything she could to diffuse the situation. In an effort to establish a sisterly link, I also made an effort to be amiable, but each time I did, she would ignore me or make disparaging remarks about my weight or looks. The time eventually came for my mom and Carlos to get married. They were marrying in the backyard, which had been converted into a temporary space with vibrant decorations and a lovely gazebo where they could exchange vows since my mother had always desired a small wedding. I assisted with my mother's wedding dress and cosmetics, since I was both anxious and enthusiastic about her special day. As my mom walked down the aisle, Amelia's anger hung over the festivities like a black cloud. Amelia had a faint frown on her face that showed how she really felt. I saw Amelia sigh loudly and roll her eyes throughout the vows, as though the entire situation was beneath her. It was clear that she couldn't bear the thought of this marriage, and other visitors were beginning to notice her behavior. The reception room, which had a buffet of everyone's favorite foods and handcrafted decorations, was where the celebration finally went. People were dancing, drinking, and generally enjoying themselves. Amelia, meanwhile, seized every chance to dampen the spirits. Even when others tried to talk to her, she made snarky comments during toasts, which made the environment awkward. She expressed her disdain with succinct, one-word responses. Amelia started acting more and more erratically as the evening wore on. She publicly criticized the decor, voiced her displeasure with the song selection, and declined to be photographed with the family. She seemed adamant about expressing her disapproval, disregarding the fact that it was ruining what ought to have been a lovely day for our family. I wanted to confront her because of her actions, but my mother tried to reassure me. She said we should allow Amelia space to process her feelings because she could be sad about her dad's second marriage. Over the years, Amelia never lived up to my mother's constant optimism that she would eventually change her mind. My connection with Carlos remained stable, but my conflict with Amelia kept becoming worse. Whenever I spent my college breaks back home, she would make fun of my lack of friends and my bad sense of style, and I would have to put up with it. Her father, Carlos, my stepfather, would intervene, reprimanding her and demanding an explanation. During those visits, the pattern of tension and coerced apologies kept coming up. Amelia would frequently poke fun at me during family get-togethers in an attempt to make me feel less confident. She would publicly disparage my successes, including my grades. In exchange, if I told her anything, she would attempt to play the victim by complaining to everyone about how terrible I was to her all the time. I always found it annoying when she would spread untrue rumors about me to family members in an attempt to damage my reputation for no apparent reason. She never changed over time, even though Carlos tried to halt her conduct after I repeatedly complained to him about it. I made the decision to spend more Christmas time at my dad's house rather than at my mom and Carlos's, in order to get away from the negativity with Amelia. Although it was quite a trek because he lived across the country, the separation was a nice diversion from the incessant presence of a sulky and resentful stepsister. With her optimistic disposition, my mother would frequently try to convince me to join her for the holidays, but I didn't have the courage to tell her about the constant harassment I received from Amelia. I didn't want to crush her hopes of us getting along, so she clung to this romanticized picture. The holidays spent with my dad served as a respite from the negative energy at my mom's house. I could unwind without worrying about Amelia judging me. Dad's house became into my haven, where I could avoid Amelia's irate looks and hurtful remarks. During my third year of college, we were informed of some heartbreaking information regarding my mother. According to the results of her routine checkup, she was diagnosed with third-stage ovarian cancer. I nearly passed out in disbelief when she told me the news. Without my beloved mother, I couldn't picture my existence. I hurried home right away to be with her. Carlos was clearly upset, but he did his best to remain composed for the sake of all of us. In the face of this unclear future, my dad, friends, and family came together to support and console us. We managed the difficulties of medical procedures, hospital stays, and the emotional roller coaster that comes with such a sobering prognosis as the days went by. It's important to note that, regrettably, Amelia did not assist my mother in any way during this trying period. Her behaviors were unhelpful and insensitive while we were dealing with the terrible facts of illness. I recall sobbing while sitting by myself outside my mother's chamber one night when things were difficult. I hoped for some calm in the silence of the night since I was terrified that my mother might die of cancer. However, I was sitting outside my mom's bedroom weeping when Amelia happened to stroll by. Rather than being kind or sympathetic, she simply grinned at me when she noticed how teary my face was. When I glanced up at her, she began to make fun of me, saying that there was nothing I could do right now. Her cruel response made things much more difficult for me at a time when I needed help. After that night, Amelia continued to be harsh in the days that followed. She even sent me posts on social media about the appearance of cancer patients in their last hours. Her ability to mock my suffering and the suffering our family was going through was awful. It was simply intolerable how heartless they were. I took comfort in my mother's resilience during those trying times. I was inspired by her fortitude in the face of hardship. Despite her bodily suffering as a result of the therapies, she continued to be an inspiration of bravery, showing me what it really means to overcome adversity. Even as the illness worsened, she continued to have a spirit that would not die. Unfortunately, my mother's disease worsened, and she died within a few months. The destruction I experienced was beyond words. For days, I sobbed because I couldn't accept that she was truly gone. I felt like I was surrounded by a thick cloud of anguish. Everyone said their goodbyes with tears during the solemn ceremony. After the funeral, the truth of her absence struck me, and I struggled to fill the vacuum left by her absence. The mourning process was a difficult and drawn-out one. It was a terrible reality that weighed heavy on my heart to realize that I could no longer pick up the phone and hear her voice, or discuss the ordinary facts of my day. The world kept spinning, but I had lost my anchor and was lost in the sea of sorrow. The time has come to read my mother's will. As my mom's only biological child, Amelia, Carlos, my dad, and I all drove to the lawyer's office together. I knew exactly what the will included, having spoken to her about it many times prior to her death. Mom and Carlos had talked about it and agreed that their own children would inherit their separate assets. The complex dynamics of our mixed family were reflected in what appeared to be a fair arrangement. In the midst of a formal atmosphere, sitting in the lawyer's office, there was a sense of expectation. It became clear that all of Mom's assets were entrusted to me as the lawyer started reading her will. I wasn't surprised by this statement, since Carlos and I had known all along. But Amelia wasn't. As the lawyer read the will, she sat across the room, her eyes tightening in anger and shock. Mom gave me numerous family treasures, in addition to the cash and belongings. It was really meaningful to me that she gave me my grandmother's exquisite jewels. I felt a connection to my heritage through those meaningful things. Her wedding gown was one priceless piece she left me, a representation of family history and affection. There was more to it than cloth. It preserved the recollections of Mom's memorable day. She also desired for me to own it. These were not only material inheritances, they played a role in the history of our family, and I really treasure them. After learning that my mother's will did not include her, she also received nothing, Amelia became furious. She started to act out, insisting on looking through the will to see if my mother had indeed given me everything she possessed. She glanced up at me after witnessing the will firsthand and said angrily that she was amazed by my mother's selfishness. She persisted in insisting that I share my mother's wealth with her because she deserved it, and I sat there in disbelief. The polite recognition of my mother's desires was disturbed by her hurtful and uncomfortable remarks. In her quest for a share of the fortune, she made cruel charges that were like daggers. Amelia's statements made me feel betrayed. Even though I was already grieving over the loss of my mother, I was temporarily dumbfounded by her boldness in demanding an equal portion of my mother's possessions. In an attempt to remain somewhat composed, I mustered the fortitude to reply. I informed her that when we were both young adults, your dad and my mom were married. As a result, they both said up front that we would be receiving their respective assets. Respecting the pact our parents made with one another is more important than being self-centered. They thought this was reasonable, and I planned to respect my mother's desires. Carlos interrupted Amelia as she attempted to voice her grievance once again, adamantly reminding her that she had no right to want anything from me. He reminded her that she would inherit his property eventually, and that she wouldn't value it if I asked for a portion now. She appeared to stop talking after this. My father, who was present, stood up and escorted me out the room. Although I had frequently told him about Amelia's unpredictable behavior, this was the first time he had really seen it. Her feeling of entitlement astounded and sickened him entirely. My father suggested that I leave Carlos's house and relocate all of my childhood belongings, along with my mother's belongings and family antiques, to his home to prevent Amelia from stealing them. After agreeing, I transferred my mother's and my belongings out of Carlos's apartment right away. Carlos and I were both sad to see me go since, in contrast to Amelia, he always showed me love and respect. He has been in touch with me to see how I'm doing and to make sure everything in my life is going well. After graduating from college, I ultimately found employment. After a while, I had saved up enough cash to support myself. Although my mother left me few possessions, they were enough to enable me to buy a home of my own. My dad even came to stay at my new house since he was so proud of me. I frequently wished my mother could see the space I had made because I missed her. I kept her wedding gown in my closet, and I would hold it as though I were embracing my mother's memories whenever I began to miss her much. Carlos called me a little while ago to inform me that Amelia was getting married. To my surprise, I was actually pleased for her, putting aside our complaints from the past. "It's been a long time since we caught up," Carlos said, inviting me to lunch with his typical enthusiasm. I hesitated a little, but I wanted to make my favorite supper. He told me that Amelia had matured since our previous encounter, and that he would make sure that we had a cordial and easy lunch at Carlos's. It all appeared to be going well. I gave Amelia my warmest congratulations on her impending marriage, since she seemed really delighted to see me. While eating lunch, we spoke about how much our lives had changed since our last encounter. I could see how pleased she looked with my soon-to-be brother-in-law when she showed me photos of her engagement. Carlos had cooked a lunch, which we were all enjoying as we sat around the table. Amelia suddenly revealed something shocking. In a light-hearted manner, she said she was still looking for the ideal wedding gown, but had not been successful. Then, without warning, she mentioned that she recalled my mother leaving me a bridal gown and requested me to give it to her as a wedding present. I was shocked when I gazed up at her. My expression reflected Carlos's astonishment. Since she would never ask me for my mother's wedding gown, I asked her if she was kidding. Amelia, however, retorted that she should wear the dress as she was getting married before me. I was shocked by her ruthless remarks. I made it clear that I could never think of doing this, highlighting the sentimental significance of it for me. I told her when our mother passed away that it was more than simply a piece of apparel. It was a treasured remembrance of my mother. However, Amelia appeared to disregard my feelings. She maintained that she had an equal right to wear the outfit because we were stepsisters and had experienced some of our mother's life together. I couldn't understand why she would want to take something so important from me, and the tension in the room increased. Amelia was adamant in her request, saying that she was willing to pay me for the dress if that was what I wanted, despite Carlos's attempts to defuse the situation by informing her that she had no right to demand my mother's wedding gown. The tension kept increasing because I was offended and annoyed that she didn't see how important the outfit was to me. Seeing the tension growing, Carlos attempted to reassure Amelia that it wasn't about money, but rather that the clothing itself had special meaning for me, because my mother had left it for me. Amelia went on to claim that I was being self-centered, and that my mother would have given her the outfit if she had been living. Considering how she had treated me over the years, I was shocked by the boldness of her allegation. She didn't care about my mother while she was dying of cancer, and now she wanted to wear my mother's outfit out of the blue, I pointed out furiously. As we kept shouting at one another, the conversation began to get hot. I reaffirmed that I couldn't imagine parting with such a sentimental memento, and that the garment was non-negotiable. The argument grew more heated due to Amelia's persistence and seeming indifference to my sentiments. Carlos attempted to defuse the situation, but I knew Amelia would not compromise. I made the decision to leave their apartment right away, because I had had enough and I wouldn't sit there and allow Amelia to treat me any worse. After thanking Carlos for the lunch, I walked out. My dad was equally as astonished as I was when I told him about the entire episode. He advised me to put cameras and an alarm system around my house right away. Although I felt that this was a little extreme, I chose to listen to my dad because I was aware of Amelia's bizarre behavior. Now fast forward to today. My phone suddenly explodes with alert notifications from my home security system when I'm at work and overloaded with meetings. An unknown male in a mask was entering my house when I opened the app. When I noticed the burglar at my place, I instantly became alarmed. As if my life depended on it, I phoned quickly and hurried home. There were police cars strewn across the front of my house as I screamed into my driveway. When I hurried inside with a distressed expression, I discovered that the man was being arrested by police. He had blood on his legs. My dog apparently became a full-fledged guard dog after taking offense at this intruder's unwanted visit. I let out an audible sigh of relief when the officers turned him around to lead him out. I instantly recognized him from Amelia's engagement photos. He will soon become my brother-in-law. He started yelling at me as soon as he saw me standing in the doorway, insisting that I call the police and testify on his behalf. He began by stating that my stepsister had forced him to remove my mother's bridal gown, which was why he was here. When I realized how ridiculous the scenario was, my eyes widened in disbelief. I couldn't see how he got himself into such an absurd situation, breaking into a house on someone else's orders. I shook my head, not believing it. But the cops stepped in and removed him before I could respond. After that, I contacted my father and told him what had transpired at my house. He promised to join me on the following flight that was available. The idea of my father's backing gave me peace. I meticulously inspected my home to make sure nothing was missing. Luckily, my mother's wedding gown, which was securely stored in my closet, was unaltered. After my dog courageously stepped in and attacked my brother-in-law, it appeared that his poorly thought-out scheme had failed. As I gave my dog a pat, I couldn't help but smile with happiness. The drama doesn't stop there, though. I've been getting calls from my envious stepsister's family, requesting that I drop the charges against her husband. She is adamant that I forgive him because he is a member of the family. The last time I looked, relatives didn't break into your house and try to take your treasures, so I instructed them to keep their thoughts to themselves. For the harm done to my property, I have also threatened to sue her and her companion. This time, despite Amelia's constant threats that I will destroy their life, I will not back down. We're discussing my mother's legacy here. We're heading to court, so the dress stays with my sister, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, and a better lawyer up. The family is furious, but I'm supported by the law and facts. When will I be able to protect my territory and my mother's memories from the thief? First update. I haven't posted in a few days. Carlos and I had a discussion about everything that occurred. He was as surprised as I was. What Amelia and her partner had been up to was unknown to me. Knowing that her father would not condone her shenanigans, Amelia had purposefully kept him in the dark about her partner's break-in and subsequent incarceration. Carlos promised to support me no matter what choice I chose. Amelia had been contacting me daily in the meanwhile. She began to apologize after realizing that I would not back down. I had known her for many years, so this surprised me. She never expressed regret to me for anything. I suppose she finally realized what they had done after seeing her partner's detention. She pleaded with me to have pity on him and to dismiss the accusations. She promised that she would never bother me again, but I knew that her words were meaningless after all the years she had been harassing me. I adamantly informed her that I would keep filing charges and that they will soon appear in small claims court together. A lawyer who can assist us in this matter has been approached by my dad and me. I made a firm decision on Amelia's family, who were urging me to withdraw the charges. I sent a video clip from my security camera in a mass email. My brother-in-law was seen breaking into my house on this video. I couldn't allow it to happen because I knew Amelia would have told them a different narrative. No rational individual would condone such a heinous conduct. Some of her relatives did contact me to apologize after I sent the emails. My proof opened their eyes to the reality of the issue, which they were unaware of. Knowing that at least some of them recognized the terrible nature of the break-in and understood the truth of what transpired was a comfort. Update 2. My previous update was a month ago. I was too engaged with my legal actions to provide an update sooner, like I already stated. I made the decision to file the charges in order to get justice for the break-in at my house. After a court struggle, I was given a fine for the harm the break-in had done to my property. I glanced at my stepsister's face, which was completely ruined, as if she had realized that her acts did have repercussions. Since her boyfriend didn't really take anything from my apartment, he was merely given a 3-month jail sentence for breaking and entering. Not only that, but my lawyer also filed a restraining order against my stepsister and her partner. It's an essential step to shield me from any future efforts to interfere with my life and to guarantee my protection. My dad has been staying with me to encourage me during this whole journey. He was still concerned that Amelia could try anything more, but after receiving a fine and a restraining order, I doubt she will have the courage. The legal repercussions will have prevented her from trying to stir problems again. Update 3. My previous update was 6 months ago. By now my life has progressed, and happily, the drama is over. The tumultuous incidents that formerly characterized my days have faded into the past. I can finally find some serenity in my life now that the court fights, family conflicts, and emotional roller coaster have all abated. Amelia and her boyfriend have avoided me ever since the court hearings. The restraining order accomplished its goal by acting as a safeguard against any possible disturbances they may have brought about. After he was freed from prison, Amelia married him, according to several of our common acquaintances. Given how insane they are, I genuinely think they both deserve to be together. I've learned the value of resilience and sticking up for what's right as I think back on the tumultuous path of the previous few months. In addition to pursuing justice for myself, the court battles served to preserve the principles and memories that my mother cherished. My life has become more secure and tranquil. A new chapter has begun, and I'm excited to see what lies ahead, free from the turbulent drama that used to characterize my life. Story 4. This narrative has a title. At his crazy wedding, I discovered that my 8-year girlfriend was having an affair with my closest buddy. Furthermore, I discovered that all of my friends were aware of it and were making fun of me behind my back. Rather than losing my temper immediately, I pretended to be unaware. I then revealed the truth during the wedding, ruining not just his special day, but his entire life. Hello, everyone. To continue providing you with the greatest material, we spend a great deal of time and energy locating these stories. It would be greatly appreciated if you could click the subscribe button if you like what we do. Your assistance is crucial to the success of our adventure and makes all the difference. I really appreciate you being here with me. Let's begin the video now. OP greets the reader first. Reddit. I don't even know where to start with this. I suppose typing all of this down is therapeutic in a way, even though it feels strange. A few years ago, when I looked back on my life, I believed I had everything all out. A close circle of friends who were like family, a stable job, and a long-term girlfriend were all in my life, or so I believed. I sit here now, wondering how I became so blind. Let me go back in time. I was a member of this close-knit group of 7 people in college. In our department, we all met. 3 men, 4 ladies, and they soon became inseparable. It was more than just studying and having parties. We acted more like family, a group that would sacrifice everything for one another, or so I believed. Ethan is there. He was both my best friend and my roommate in college. I thought of this person as a brother. For 4 years, we shared a home, laughed at the silliest things, and supported one another through good times and bad. I would have laughed in your face if you had told me then that he would be the one to stab me in the back. It's getting ahead of itself, though. Nicole is the next one. Before I even joined our group, she was a member. However, it wasn't until our 2nd year that we began dating. It was a simple click. When you first meet someone, everything seems simple. It was the way with her. That's what I believed at the time anyway. We spent 8 years together. 8. Despite our ups and downs, I firmly felt that we were creating something lasting. marriage, children, and a shared existence. It seemed obvious. At first, Nicole was closer to the group than I was. However, once we began dating, I also joined in. I got more than just a girlfriend. A large group of pals became like family to me. Naturally, Ethan also played a significant role in that. Since he lived with me, he was drawn into the group, even if at first he wasn't as close to everyone. It felt lovely to live. After graduation, we all kept in touch, spending time together, attending birthday celebrations and weddings, and even traveling on vacation. I believed I had everything. A prosperous family business that I oversaw, a closest friend I trusted with my life, and a girlfriend who had supported me through everything. In retrospect, though, I should have seen the fissures. About a year prior to Ethan's wedding, Nicole and I began to have problems. I was prepared to get married, start a family, and settle down. She continued to push back, though. She would say things like, "Let's wait a little longer," or "I'm not ready yet." I initially believed she might have a point. The more I considered it, the less sense it made, even if we were both preoccupied with our work. We were basically living together as if we were already married. 4 years had passed since we moved in together. Our finances were secure, and I was operating my dad's office supply business and earning more money than I had ever done. It seemed like the next logical step to be married. However, she would always find an excuse to put it off when I brought it up. She began to say that I should concentrate on my profession, or that I was pressing her. Even so, what did that mean? I was already succeeding at my job. She was going out much more without me, too, I realized at the same time. She would spend weekends with friends while I worked, attend parties I didn't want to go, or stay late at group get-togethers. I trusted her, so I didn't give it any thought. Why wouldn't I? 8 years later. In retrospect, I see how naive I was. Nicole wasn't the kind to start arguments or act aloof, so I never had any suspicions. Even when things weren't going well, she continued to laugh, grin, and give me the impression that we were all right. We're fighting about marriage, I suppose, but every couple fights, so we'll work it out. Ethan's engagement was publicized at this time. Things proceeded quickly after he met Lauren, his fiancée, around a year prior. Ethan didn't look like him. To be honest, he had no intention of getting married. However, Lauren appeared to be a decent person and came from a rich household. Perhaps Ethan has finally found the one, I thought. I was overjoyed when Ethan asked me to be his best man. I replied sure, of course. I was best friends with this guy. I wanted to be there for him on his special day because he had supported me through some of the most trying periods in my life. Nicole was equally thrilled about the nuptials. She had been discussing bridesmaid outfits with Lauren and assisting with the planning. She was also close to Ethan, so it felt natural for her to be involved. The wedding was significant, an elegant gathering in a stunning hotel. The day prior, Nicole and I took the car there. Despite the tension between us, I recall feeling exhilarated. I kept thinking we might be able to get back in touch this weekend. It's true that weddings serve as a reminder of commitment and love. Until we arrived at the hotel, I began to get the beginning of a migraine. I occasionally experience them, particularly when I'm exhausted or under stress. While I slept in the hotel, I told Nicole that she may go to the rehearsal dinner without me. When my migraine worsened later that night, I discovered I had forgotten my medications. I made the decision to find a drugstore and go to the parking lot to pick up the car. It happened at that moment. When I saw them, I couldn't put into words how I felt. As if they were teens skulking around, Ethan and Nicole were kissing in my car. I initially believed that my eyes were deceiving me. I just stared at them as I stood there motionless. My brain seemed to be shutting down, attempting to interpret what I was witnessing. They failed to notice me at all. They were too preoccupied with one another. How long I stood there is a mystery to me. 30s. It seemed to go on forever. My chest constricted, my hands trembled, and I briefly believed I may vomit. I moved away rather than face them. I knew I couldn't just blow up in the parking lot, even though my mind was racing. To decide what to do next, I had to think. So I returned to the hotel and sat looking at the walls of my room. Even though the treachery made my stomach turn, I refrained from crying. Not quite yet. I was numb enough not to cry. Everything began to fall apart that evening. But Nicole and Ethan weren't the only ones involved. The treachery was far more profound than I could have ever guessed, as I was about to discover. That night, I didn't get any sleep. I tried, but the picture of Nicole and Ethan in the car stayed in my head every time I closed my eyes. How could they have done this to me? I kept asking myself. Cole, someone I believed I would be with for the rest of my life, and my best pal, Ethan, the one man I believed would always be there for me. My anger increased as I gave it more thought. By morning, treachery wasn't the only thing on my thoughts. It was buzzing with inquiries. For what duration has this been occurring? Was it a single error, or was there more to it? And maybe the most terrifying query of them. Was there anyone else who knew? Late the night before, Nicole returned to the room and pretended nothing had happened. She inquired as to if my migraine had improved. As if nothing had happened, he kissed my forehead and got into bed. At that moment, I wanted to yell at her, but I was unable to do so. Not quite yet. I needed time to consider and replies first. I made myself act normal the following morning. At breakfast, I said hello to everyone. When I spotted Ethan, I grinned, and even struck up a conversation with Nicole. Every time I looked at them, I felt my stomach turn. I couldn't reveal that I knew, though. They would make a mistake again if they believed they had gotten away with it. I was hoping that would happen. I made the decision to conduct some reconnaissance after breakfast. I was anxious to find out if this was a secret between Ethan and Nicole, or if anyone else in our group was aware of it. But I hadn't spoken to anyone yet. I reasoned that staying and listening would be the simplest way to learn. I heard something later that afternoon that broke my heart even more. I passed one of the suites where some of our friends were staying on my way back to my room. There was laughter coming from inside, and the door was slightly open. I was about to give up when I heard Nicole's and Ethan's names. I went cold. When I heard Kyle, one of the other guys in our group, joke about Ethan and Nicole's covert meeting, I initially thought I had misheard. The rest of them laughed when he mentioned that they will be caught one day. They are aware. As soon as I realized the truth, I felt like my stomach dropped. My entire friend group was complicit in the betrayal, in addition to my girlfriend and best friend. The worst part they all knew. They were giggling over it. Despite how much this would hurt me, none of them seemed to care. It went beyond simple treachery. It was humiliation. Sitting in that room, making jokes about me, were people I had trusted and cared about for years. I was no longer able to listen. I left before they saw me, but I could still hear their laughter. All of a sudden, the betrayal seemed so much larger. Nicole and Ethan were no longer the only focus. They were all of them. They had all been lying to me, laughing behind my back while pretending to be Nicole and Ethan. The weight of everything struck me at once when I returned to my room. I took a shaky breath and sat on the edge of the bed. Tears were starting to form and my hands were shaking, but I didn't want to cry. It felt weak to cry. Rather, I spent what seemed like hours sitting there trying to decide what to do. It was obvious that I would not overlook this. I couldn't just confront Nicole and Ethan in private and let them walk away unscathed. It was only fitting that they experienced the same anguish since they had degraded me, and the rest of our alleged friends should also be held accountable if they were complicit. That's when the plan started to take shape. The rehearsal dinner that evening was torture. I went because I didn't want to tip anyone off that something was wrong, but sitting across from Ethan and Nicole was unbearable. I kept watching them looking for signs. They didn't sit next to each other, but there were little things, stolen glances, subtle smiles that made my blood boil. At one point, Nicole even leaned over and whispered something to me about how beautiful the venue was. I nodded, but all I could think was, "You were kissing Ethan in my car less than 24 hours ago. How dare you?" She acted so normal, so innocent, and it made me sick. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease. He was laughing, making jokes and playing the role of the charming groom-to-be. It was almost impressive how effortlessly he lied to everyone around him. I stayed quiet for most of the dinner, only speaking when spoken to. Inside, I was seething, but I couldn't let it show. Not quite yet. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. That night, back in our room, Nicole tried to cuddle up to me. It took everything I had not to push her away. Instead, I pretended to be tired and rolled over, facing the wall. She didn't push it, and after a while, I heard her breathing slow as she fell asleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling and going over my plan. Tomorrow was the wedding, the perfect stage for everything to come to light. I wasn't just going to confront Ethan and Nicole. I was going to make sure everyone knew what they had done. I wanted the world to see them for who they really were. By morning, I felt strangely calm. The anger was still there, but it was buried under a sense of determination. Today was the day. Today I was going to take back control. The morning of Ethan's wedding, I woke up feeling like a bomb ticking down to detonation. Nicole acted like nothing was wrong, which made my stomach churn. She asked if I wanted breakfast. I said no. I couldn't look at her face without picturing Ethan's hands on her, without hearing my so-called buddies laughing at my expense. By then, I'd already determined what I was going to do. I wasn't the kind of person to make a scene or get retribution out of spite. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the lies, the betrayal, the blatant contempt for my sentiments. Nicole and Ethan felt they could do whatever they wanted and yet smile at me like nothing had happened, and my buddies thought they could cover for them without consequences. Not today. I spent the morning quietly getting ready. Nicole proceeded to help the bride, Lauren, with some last-minute preparations, leaving me alone in the room. That gave me time to pack my belongings. I knew I wasn't staying after this wedding. Whatever occurred, I was done with Nicole, Ethan, and the entire bunch. I wanted to make sure I could walk away clean when the time came. At last, it was time to leave for the ceremony. I put on my suit, looked in the mirror, and re-energized myself. You're capable. Follow the plan. This is something they deserve. As anticipated, I got to the venue early for the best man. Ethan smiled as if we were still best friends when he greeted me. Man, are you prepared for the big day? He clapped me on the back and asked. I grinned. If he heard the sharpness in my voice, I couldn't be more prepared. He kept it a secret. He was too busy mingling with everyone he saw and entertaining guests. Meanwhile, Nicole was interacting with the bridesmaids. I tried to stay away from her. If she tried to talk to me, I wouldn't trust myself to control my emotions. With white chairs, floral arrangements, and a little stage for the vows, the wedding was held in a stunning outdoor garden. The chairs were packed with excited guests. Ethan appeared to be the ideal groom as he stood at the front. Nicole was seated directly in front of me in the second row. As I waited for the appropriate moment for the officiant to start, my pulse raced. I got up. I said quietly but loudly enough that everyone could hear me. I want to say a few things about Ethan before we get started. A chuckle of surprise was heard. Ethan didn't mind that this wasn't the customary speech time. He even grinned, presumably anticipating that I would discuss our friendship and my pride in him. The bride, Lauren, gave me a courteous nod despite her intrigued expression. I took a big breath, turned to face the throng, and moved to the front. My voice was clear, my hands solid. Ethan has been in my life for years. Since college, he has been my closest friend. Together, we've experienced everything. That's what I believed anyway. Ethan's grin wavered a bit. Nicole shifted in her chair uneasily. Excellent. I have appreciated Ethan's charm, sense of humor, and secrecy over the years. I emphasized the final word. The audience laughed uncomfortably. Ethan's face went white as he realized something was wrong. I went on last night. I discovered how adept Ethan is at keeping things under wraps. As it seems, he has been keeping something from us all. Something that everyone here, even Lauren, should know, in my opinion. Lauren glanced between Ethan and me, seeming perplexed. With a strained voice, Ethan took a step forward. Okay, that's sufficient. Just let's. To halt him, I held up a hand. Ethan, let me finish. I believe that everyone should hear this. I faced the crowd once more. In the parking lot last night, I saw Ethan making out with my girlfriend, Nicole. Actually, my automobile. He has so been having affairs with someone else's partner while organizing this wedding. Mine. The audience's cries were thunderous. Nicole leaped to her feet. Her face turned crimson. That is untrue. Her voice cracked as she yelled. She was clearly in panic. Ethan seemed scared as much as angry. This is absurd. Nicole doesn't want to marry you. Therefore, you're merely attempting to spoil my wedding. I paid them both no attention. I told the crowd, it gets better, because not only had Nicole and Ethan been skulking around, but our mutual friends, the whole network of individuals I believed I could trust, were aware of it. They have been acting in their place, giggling in private, even joking about when they would be apprehended. There was mayhem in the room. People pointed fingers, shouted, and mumbled. Lauren had a terrified expression. Is this accurate? She turned to Ethan and demanded, inform me that this is untrue. Lauren didn't believe Ethan's attempt to deny it, as he stammered over his remarks. After her guests began muttering, some following Lauren, while others stared at Ethan and Nicole in disbelief, she tore off her veil and hurried out, leaving Ethan yelling. I did not wait for the consequences. Despite Nicole's cries for me to stop, I left the stage right away. You're insane. Everything is being ruined by you. She grabbed at my arm and snarled. I dismissed her and continued to move. I could still hear the commotion behind me when I arrived at the parking lot. After taking a deep breath, I got into my car and drove off. I didn't care where I was heading, so I drove for hours that night. Only fatigue and a deafening sense of emptiness remained after the adrenaline that had propelled me through my speech had left. My phone was buzzing all the time, notifications from social media, calls, and texts. However, I disregarded them all. Whatever followed next, I wasn't prepared for it. It was at a petrol station in the middle of nowhere when I eventually pulled over. I parked, got out, and stood there looking up at the night sky for a long time. My head was a jumble of feelings, and my body felt heavy. Betrayal, anger, an odd feeling of relief. I had completed the task. They were exposed by me. But what comes next? I finally looked at my phone. Dozens of missed calls and texts were present as anticipated. To begin with, Nicole had sent the most messages. Please, can we have a conversation? Let me explain, please. Before becoming enraged. She was blaming me by the end. Because of what you did, you're crazy. It wasn't necessary for you to wreck everything. Are you even aware of the harm you have caused to Ethan? Excellent. She was angry. She was entitled to be. Ethan had left several messages. 2, but not as many. The majority were incensed and accused me of being spiteful and jealous. That's just too much for you. Nicole had no desire to wed you. You attempted to wreck my life then. You know what? You did more than simply injure me. My parents and Lauren were also harmed by you. My other so-called pals had also added their voices. Some people were upset with me for publicly revealing their private problems. Others expressed regret, saying they were unaware of the whole situation, as if that made their collusion acceptable. None of them got a response from me. I wasn't prepared. Rather, I climbed back into my vehicle and headed to my parents' place. I needed the consolation of people who genuinely cared about me, even if I hadn't been there in months. After seeing my expression when I got there, my mother realized something wasn't right. She simply gave me a hug and said I could stay for however long I needed to, without asking any questions. The fallout began in full force the following morning. I let Nicole's call go to voicemail when she called again. She sounded desperate this time. Could we just talk, please? We've been together for 8 years and I know you're upset. Don't discard that because of a single error. I must explain. I gave a bitter laugh at what she said. 1 incorrect number. This was no error. It was a decision. A sequence of decisions taken over an unknown amount of time. She had not simply deceived me. She had done it with my best buddy, on multiple occasions, and with knowledge. After that, there was no turning back. Ethan continued to send the same texts, angry charges and feeble defenses. That was not your right. You could have dealt with this in private, but you chose not to. I was humiliated in front of everyone by you. Nicole no longer loves you, therefore that's why you're resentful. I had a brief moment of hesitation. Had I overreached myself? Then, though, I recalled the laughter I had heard, the arrogant expressions on their faces when they believed I was unaware. I hadn't gone that far. No. They deserved worse, if anything. Lauren's silence was broken by the second day. I received a message from one of Ethan's groomsmen, whom I hardly knew. Hello. I wanted to let you know that Lauren canceled the wedding entirely. She is currently residing with her parents. Ethan is not feeling well. He lied to his parents, who are upset and have expelled him. Excellent. Ethan deserved at least that. Nevertheless, I felt a tiny bit of remorse. For Lauren, not for Ethan. In all of this, she was collateral damage. She needed to know the truth before committing her life to someone as dishonest as Ethan, even though I hadn't intended to upset her. Nicole, on the other hand, continued to reside in our shared flat. The prospect of seeing her made me sick. I then requested that my brother go pack my belongings. He made no inquiries, simply arrived at the flat and gave me a call after he was finished. He handed me the boxes and added, "You're better off without her." I couldn't agree with you more. You give Carmen Deeks a call. On day 3, Nicole unexpectedly showed up at my parents' place, which was the true turning moment. As my mother called for me, the expression on her face as she answered the door said it all. Nicole was in dire need. Mostly because I didn't want her to make a disturbance, I went outside to speak with her. She appeared awful, as if she hadn't had any sleep in days. "We need to talk," she remarked in a tremulous voice. I folded my arms. "What is it about?" She began to babble, apologize, place blame, stress, and declare that she never intended for things to go this bad. She even dared to claim that she had been perplexed by our relationship and that Ethan meant nothing. She said that you had been pressuring me to get married, and I felt helpless. I gave a sour laugh. Captured. You have the option to speak with me. If you felt that way about me, you might have ended our relationship. However, you chose to have an affair with my best friend instead of me. Don't try to blame me for this. She crumpled her face, but I didn't mind. She was not present to accept accountability. She had come here to heal herself. She changed her strategy when she knew I wouldn't forgive her. However, you were not required to do what you did. I was humiliated by you. Ethan was embarrassed by you. Everyone was humiliated by you. I spoke icily as I gazed at her. You made a fool of yourself. After that, she tried to guilt me one final time before leaving. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "I hope you're happy. Everything is damaged by you." For the first time since this nightmare started, I experienced a strange feeling of closure as she left. I thought I could breathe at last. My speech's consequences extended beyond Nicole and Ethan. The whole group was affected. Mutual friends quickly heard about it, and the majority of them took sides. Some apologized, saying they were unaware of the gravity of the situation. Others remained faithful to Ethan, claiming that I had gone too far by interfering with his wedding. I didn't give a damn. They were all blocked by me. I finished them at the end of the week. Kyle, Nicole, Ethan, and everyone else. They had permanently left my life. Losing so many folks was painful. I had thought about family, but it was preferable to remaining in the company of traitors and liars. I believed Nicole and Ethan were the last to be betrayed after the wedding. However, I kept thinking about the rest of my alleged buddies as the days went by. The people who abandoned me. Those who remained silent while knowing. They weren't merely onlookers. They were involved in collusion. They pretended it didn't matter and made jokes about it while covering for Nicole and Ethan. I could have ignored it and turned my back on them all, but I didn't feel comfortable doing so. They were mistaken to believe they could treat me like an idiot and get away with it. I wasn't going to lose my temper or go straight to them. No, my plan was superior. One that allowed me to remain hidden while they dealt with the fallout from their deeds. The loudest person in the hotel room that evening was Kyle. He laughed the most when he joked that Ethan and Nicole might be caught one day. He appeared to enjoy my ignorance, and I recall the arrogant tone in his voice. He was the one who most deserved a pinch of karma. Kyle was a sales manager for a mid-sized IT company. He enjoyed boasting that he was on track for a promotion and that his employer had a lot of faith in him. However, most individuals were unaware of this. Our late-night hangouts taught me that Kyle had a small side business. Selling business leads to rivals in order to make quick money. He had previously told us, intoxicated, how simple it was to earn a few $1,000s illegally without being discovered. I used an old email account I had made in college to carry out my plan that evening. I wrote Kyle's company an anonymous email. I provided a thorough explanation of how he sold leads, as well as screenshots of his texts in which he boasted about doing so. I took care to remove any personal information that might be used to identify me in the email. I learned about Kyle's termination via rumors within a week. Apparently, his supervisor didn't take too lightly to treason. I felt absolutely no guilt. Kyle had made fun of me for it. believed he was untouchable, and betrayed my trust. Now he understood what it was like to lose everything as a result of his own behavior. Although Sarah didn't speak as much as Kyle, her silence was equally damning. Throughout the years that she had been a member of the group, she consistently asserted that she was an impartial party in any drama. However, complicity is simply another name for neutrality, and her loyalty was demonstrated by the way she laughed that evening. Being a food blogger was something Sarah took great delight in. She collaborated with a few nearby eateries to advertise their meals and maintained a passively effective Instagram presence. However, she failed to disclose to her fans that a large number of her positive evaluations were fraudulent. She demanded favorable reviews from struggling little eateries, regardless of the caliber of the food. She had once made a joke about giving a place she had never even been to a 5-star rating. I exposed her because I knew it would damage her carefully manicured image, and I did just that. I made a burner account and began contacting the eateries she had collaborated with. I pretended to be a worried customer and sent screenshots of her texts in which she openly promised to raise their ratings in exchange for money. At best, Sarah's activities were exploitative, and some of these restaurants were already having trouble. One of the restaurant owners quickly posted a critical review of her. They revealed her phony reviews and, just for good measure, shared screenshots. Sarah's reputation plummeted after the post went viral locally. She subsequently closed her account as her collaborations dried up and her followers declined. Amy was the group's social butterfly. She was the one who kept everyone in touch and thrived on gossip. In addition, she was the one who, despite everything, always acted the kindest toward me. But I could definitely hear her that night in the hotel room. She didn't stop Kyle or Sarah from laughing, but she wasn't laughing as much either. Amy was a well-known marketing expert who enjoyed boasting about the events she assisted in planning and naming off her famous clients. One thing, though, she never mentioned: the phony degree. She used to gain access to things. Amy had confided in me during a vulnerable moment back in college. She had a buddy create a degree for her, so she could apply for jobs after she left her program midway through. Since then, she had been skating by. I waited until she blogged about gaining a new client, relying on charm and good fortune to move up the ladder, one of her career's largest accounts. I then sent her employer an anonymous email that included links to public records proving she never did graduate. Making the connection didn't take long. Amy's new customer fired her within days, and her employer opened an internal probe. Her reputation suffered and she lost her largest account, yet she wasn't dismissed outright. In her field, word spread swiftly, and she struggled to find new employment. I didn't entirely ignore the other two group members, even though they were only minor characters in the betrayal. I anonymously reported a number of their postings for breaching privacy policies, because they had a tendency to share too many intimate facts about other people's lives on social media. They had to straighten up their behavior when their account was momentarily suspended. The other one? At work, they like spreading tales about their colleagues in an attempt to go up the corporate ladder. I ensured that their supervisor was informed of their actions, which resulted in some awkward discussions and a warning. Although it wasn't as dramatic as the others, the message was quite obvious. You cannot act in a way that will always have repercussions. The highlight of it all? I was never suspected by any of them. As their lives fell apart in minor but important ways, I remained utterly hidden. It wasn't about getting even just to get even. It has to do with responsibility. They pretended to be Ethan and Nicole, laughed at my suffering, and believed their behavior would never be discovered. They were mistaken. Once the dust had settled, I experienced an odd feeling of closure. I didn't have to face them or listen to their excuses. I didn't have to defend or debate what I was doing. I just cut them out of my life and allowed the fallout from their actions do the talking. Story 5. The title of this article is After Returning from a Girls' Trip. My partner requested an open relationship. I ejected her. Hello, everyone. To continue providing you with the greatest material, we spend a great deal of time and energy locating these articles. It would be greatly appreciated if you could click the subscribe button if you like what we do. Your assistance is crucial to the success of our adventure and makes all the difference. I really appreciate you being here with me. Let's begin the video now. The OP begins by greeting everyone. Tell me what you think. I'm not sure whether I'm overreacting. Okay, so this is how it all began. For the most part, things were going well between my 28-year-old male fiancé and my 27-year-old female ex-fiancé. We had been together for 5 years. At least that's what I believed. Everything clicked when we first met in our sophomore year of college. She was intelligent, humorous, and had a positive vibe that made you want to be around her. Although we were buddies at first, things quickly became more serious. After a few years of living together, splitting expenses, and making plans for the future, it seemed only natural to get engaged, and she accepted my proposal last year. Without hesitation. We had even begun discussing the possibility of purchasing a home and starting a family in the future. It was the reason this whole thing was so difficult to comprehend. I was losing more than just my fiancé. The life we had been creating together was slipping away from me. Recently returned from a trip with her buddies as a big girl. Before she departed, things appeared to be going well, and she was gone for around a week. She was planning, thrilled, discussing all they planned to accomplish. I felt pleased for her, even urged her to go and enjoy herself. She puts in a lot of effort, so I thought she might benefit from a respite. But something didn't feel quite right when she returned. It felt as if she wasn't quite present, and I'm not sure how to put it. You know, when someone is there in person, but their thoughts are elsewhere. That was how it felt. She usually greets me with a huge smile and an embrace after we've been separated for a few days, and she's excited to tell me everything about her vacation. However, she hardly spoke this time. She simply shrugged and said everything was okay when I inquired how it went. Then she left her bag by the entrance and walked right by me to the bedroom. I chose to ignore it, assuming she was simply exhausted. She hardly touched her meal at our supper that night, instead spending the most of it browsing through her phone. It wasn't typical of her, but she started acting strangely throughout the course of the following several days. She spent a lot of time, almost constantly, on her phone. That caught my attention since she had never been the kind to become fixated on her phone. Then there was the way she began to behave in my presence. She wouldn't make eye contact, appeared preoccupied throughout our conversations, and there was little physical affection either. Although we weren't infatuated, we were always rather loving toward one another. All of a sudden, it seemed as though an invisible wall separated us. I had a nagging suspicion that something was wrong. I made the decision to give her some room in the hopes that she would change her mind. I reasoned that since relationships aren't ideal, she would open up when she was ready if I took a step back. However, that did not occur. Rather, the gap between us just widened. I so made an effort to bring it up one evening after supper by inquiring as to if she was bothered by anything or had anything on her mind. She didn't waste her time telling me that I was overanalyzing the situation and that everything was okay. However, her tone did not correspond with what she said. She seemed more concerned with persuading herself than I was. Even though I sensed something wasn't right, I chose to ignore it. You begin to notice these things after 5 years of dating. I didn't want to push myself too far, but it was really getting to me. What was happening? Why was she behaving this way? After a few more days, I began to see trends. Late at night, she would get texts, and when I entered the room, she would turn her phone over. This wasn't typical, but I'm not the type of person who snoops around or makes accusations without evidence. I considered going up to her, but I didn't want to come out as suspicious. Rather, I made an effort to stay active and concentrate on my work. I assumed she would ultimately inform me if something was going on. I was going to be surprised, boy. In retrospect, I believe I anticipated something significant, but I was unsure of what it was. She stated she wanted to chat one evening after she got home from work. My heart fell at once, since let's be honest, good things never begin with anything. We must speak. I tried to remain calm as I sat down, but my thoughts were racing. What may it be? Did I make a mistake? Thus, we found ourselves seated on the couch. The tension in the air was palpable to me. She was avoiding eye contact, fidgeting, and fiddling with her hands. She struck me with it at that point. Her voice was calm but a bit too cautious as she remarked, "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship lately." I arched an eyebrow. "All right. What precisely are you thinking about?" "Just how we could improve it, you know," she remarked, glancing up at me at last. better, I leaned back and asked. Now what's the matter? She bit her lip and paused for a second. It's all right, she responded hastily. Things are going fine, although several of the females talked about their relationships when I was on the trip. They expressed their happiness at having discovered methods to increase their mutual trust and freedom. I blinked as I tried to take in her words. Liberty and confidence. Confused, I repeated, even so. What does that mean? Her hands were twitching uneasily in her lap. She sounded almost too composed, as if she were trying to tell herself that this was just another chat, but she refused to look me in the eye. She continued to glance at the wall behind me instead, as if she was terrified of what she might see if she looked at my face. Her delivery was well prepared, as if she had rehearsed the speech a dozen times in her mind before delivering it out. It felt more worse because of that, as if this hadn't happened on the spur of the moment. I assumed she had planned this. She inhaled deeply, as if she were preparing for a major event. Then she said it. We ought to try an open relationship, in my opinion. My brain briefly shorted out, I promise. As I tried to take in what she had just said, I just gazed at her. Hold on. What? At last, I was able to speak louder than I had planned. Her expression was grave as she gazed at me. She continued. I've been thinking about it for a while now. With purpose, as if she were attempting to persuade us both. It may be beneficial to us, in my opinion. As I sat there looking at her, I tried to think about having an open relationship. Are you serious now? Yes, she answered in a stern but composed tone. It isn't as insane as it seems. It works for them, therefore many people are doing it. It all comes down to honesty and mutual trust. Have faith in my voice rising. What is the connection between trust and bringing other individuals into our relationship? What is the source of this? With a sigh, she combed through her hair. I realize it's a lot to process, but I spoke with a few of the females that were traveling, and they told me about their experiences. Now they are content. They claimed that it had improved their relationship with their partners. I was so shocked that I shook my head. What did you think? That I simply go ahead and do this? That it would be acceptable to me? She seemed to be attempting to be patient as her expression softened. I didn't say you had to make a decision immediately. I simply believe it's something we ought to think about. After all this time together, I want to make sure that we're still developing and not stagnating. I felt a knot tighten in my chest and struggled to catch myself. After 5 years together, you suddenly believe that we are stuck? What do you believe to be the answer? Sharing a bed with someone else. My remarks made her wince, but she didn't back down. That's not all there is to it. It's about discovering our distinct selves while being united. I still adore you despite all. I'm sitting there feeling depressed in the meantime. What I was hearing was unbelievable. 5 years. We've been constructing a life together for 5 stinking years. She now desired to toss everything in this manner. Before, we had never even discussed open relationships. It was not in line with our desires or identity. As far as I was aware, I questioned her about the source of this. Was she not happy? Did she think our relationship was lacking something? No, she answered. We had a wonderful connection, and she adored me. She simply believed that there could be a way to improve it further. I couldn't understand that. Why would she want to tamper with things if they were going well? I informed her of it. It's not messing with it, she said. It's changing. I won't tell lies. I was enraged by that. Changing. This Pokemon isn't this. Our connection is this. I narrowed my eyes and leaned forward. Is there a specific person in question? During the trip, did you meet anyone? Her head jerked up and she seemed nearly insulted. What? Oh, of course not. She shook her head and spoke fast. Are you certain? I probed, looking at her face. Because it seems like there's more to this than what you're saying, and this is coming out of nowhere. I swear, she replied, raising her voice slightly above normal. No one else is there. I had no encounters, and that isn't the point of this. It's just something I've been considering. I crossed my arms and leaned back. There's no one else, you promise? I repeated while closely observing her. Her face tense, she nodded. Indeed, I promise. Nobody else is at issue here. It concerns us. I informed her that I needed time to reflect. At the time, I was at a loss for words. I entered the bedroom and spent some time sitting there, gazing at the wall. My mind was scattered everywhere. Was this thing for real? Did she mean it? Was she even someone I knew anymore? I returned outside after an hour or so. As if nothing had happened, she continued to browse through her phone while seated on the couch. I remarked, "I can't do this," after standing there for a moment. At last, her face was peaceful as she gazed up at me. "What are you saying?" "I mean, an open relationship is not something I can do. I don't have any interest in it, and I doubt I ever will." My voice was steady as I spoke. She crossed her arms and placed her phone on the coffee table. "Well," she answered hesitantly, "perhaps we ought to take a moment to determine whether we still have the same goals in mind." For me, it was it. Trying to figure out how she could be so nonchalant about this, I just gazed at her. 5 years. My voice trembled a little as I spoke. After 5 years of dating, this is what you have to say, as if it were insignificant. At that moment, her expression shifted, as if she was beginning to take my seriousness seriously. "That's not how I meant it." "Quickly," she said. "I just believe that we need to discuss our future goals." "There is nothing to discuss." I spoke aggressively. "You're not who I believed you to be if you desire an open relationship. Furthermore, I will not stand by and watch you destroy all we have created because your buddies have influenced you." She was momentarily shocked as she sat there. "Are you really throwing me out for this?" Her voice broke as she asked. "Indeed," I remarked, looking down at her. "Gather your belongings and head off." She began to cry as tears welled up in her eyes. "This is not how I intended it to go," she cried. "All I wanted to do was talk about it, that's all. I had no intention of hurting you." "Nothing else can be said," I informed her. "I never wanted to have this talk. I won't. And I can't do this." After wiping it, she got up and went to the bedroom to pack a bag, her face sniffling. I didn't say anything else or follow her. She emerged a few minutes later. Slung over her shoulder, her luggage came to a halt at the threshold. "Is this the one?" Softly, she inquired. "Yes, it is." Without glancing at her, I said. After a moment of hesitation, she opened the door and left. I felt as like my entire world had just fallen apart as I sat down on the couch and stared at the empty spot where her belongings had been. I repeatedly asked myself how we had arrived to this position, but no matter how many times I ran it through my mind, I was unable to come up with a logical response. That was the start of the end. The flat seemed so empty the night she departed. Her belongings remained, her toiletries, her clothing. She likes to scatter all the small trinkets around. However, she had left. And that really got to me. 5 years of constructing a life together, making plans for the future, and it all fell apart in a single discussion. My phone kept buzzing the next morning. Her name was all on it as I snatched it from the nightstand. Text messages, missed phone calls, voicemails. I browsed the messages on the side. "Could we just chat, please?" I read one text. One more person said, "I'm so sorry. I had no intention of hurting you. I only wish to clarify." I played a sample of one of the voicemails, but it was more of the same. "Hey, just give me a chance to talk to you. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I must explain. I can't let you go in this manner." Then I got a call from her pal. Evidently, they had learned about the incident and were rushing to offer their apologies. She went too far, they said, and it was their responsibility because they had been promoting open relationships during the trip. It got better when one of them even stated, "We didn't think she'd actually bring it up to you like that." I told them to back off and get away with it. I didn't want to hear her friends' justifications or explanations. The thing that annoyed me the most was that she allowed them to have such an impact on her. If her friends could influence her that easily, what else may they persuade her to do? When I told my family, they were incensed. "You dodged a bullet," my mother would remark often. My father, who typically stays out of my personal affairs, told me that I was correct to hold my position. I was already doubting myself, so that encouragement meant a lot. The situation with her family, however, was different. Her mother called and said she was simply confused and that I should give her another opportunity. "You're throwing away a beautiful relationship over a misunderstanding," her father said, in an attempt to shame me. Miscommunication? She was direct in her request to sleep with others. In what way is that a miscommunication? However, some of our common friends were the worst. Some of them attempted to convince me that I had overreacted. One even said that she was only expressing her desires honestly. Isn't that advantageous? Yes, being honest is wonderful, but there's a line between being honest and shocking your fiancé with something that totally contradicts everything you've worked so hard to build. One of my friends, let's call him Dave, really annoyed me. He insisted that I be more open-minded and that I was being outdated, even 2024, he said. Man, these days, relationships aren't black and white. He had witnessed what I was going through, so I was shocked that he was standing up for her. One of her closest friends, Anna, then revealed that my ex had been discussing the possibility of an open relationship before to the trip. She apparently brought it up as a joke during a get-together a few months prior, and everyone laughed it off. I felt even worse about that, as if I had been abandoned while she had been experimenting for some time. I tried to decide what to do for the following several days. She persisted in contacting me by text and phone, pleading with me to meet and discuss the situation. A part of me was still very upset and furious, but I also wanted to listen to her. How can you recover from such an event? When someone can so nonchalantly hurl a bomb into your relationship for a few days, how can you trust them? I was in this strange limbo. I didn't want to see her or listen to her justifications, on the one hand. However, the thought of receiving no responses was making me anxious. What if the tale wasn't just that? What if everything she said had been false? I recall pacing back and forth in my living room one evening, reviewing it in my mind, even before the open relationship issue. I even thought of phoning her, but I always stopped myself before I could reach the phone. Ultimately, I was persuaded to meet her by a few close friends. "You must get closure," one of them said. "If not, this will continue to bother you." They were correct, despite my reluctance to acknowledge it. I finally came to the conclusion that I wanted closure. The main reason I agreed to meet with her was to see whether she would be honest about what was actually happening. I sought answers since I had a feeling there was more to the tale. We scheduled a meeting time in a cafe. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, perhaps a rational explanation, or at the very least a sincere apology. However, I was unprepared for what I was going to learn. Around 5 minutes early, I arrived at the cafe. I wanted to arrive first, locate a seat, and get ready for whatever it was she would say. Although I was anxious, my main goal was to get it done. She appeared to have had little sleep when she arrived on time. She had quite untidy hair. She appeared tense and wore little makeup. Although I'll confess that I felt sorry for her, I tried to remind myself of our purpose. We just stared at each other for a few seconds after she took a seat across from me. Then she began to speak. She immediately expressed regret, claiming that she had handled everything incorrectly and had no intention of hurting me. She said that she hadn't been considering an open relationship for a while. During the trip, her friends brought it up, and she became enthralled with their enthusiasm. It was just a what-if scenario, she said. Not something she was serious about pursuing, but something she felt we could discuss. "I never intended to do you harm," she said again and again. "I only wanted to discuss the concept with you." I informed her that she wouldn't have surprised me with something like that if she truly cherished our relationship. Instead of waiting until after a lady's vacation, when she was obviously influenced by her friends, she would have spoken to me first. She gave a nod. She replied she understood, tears in her eyes. Even though she appeared sincere in her distress, I didn't believe her. Her reasoning didn't seem to make sense. I made the decision to ask her a question I hadn't intended to ask at that point. "Could you show me your phone?" Her face became white. I will always remember that look. After a moment of hesitation, she gave it to him, most likely believing that I wouldn't actually check it. I'm not the type of man that typically engages in such behavior. I've never felt the urge to violate someone's privacy, but as I sat there with her phone in my hand, I couldn't help but follow my instincts. I could feel the hammering of my heart in my ears. I didn't want to do it in part, What if I discovered something that fundamentally altered my perception of her? But another aspect of myself, the portion that made the stomach turn, having the impression that something was off. I had to know. I had trembling hands. I quickly found what I was seeking for when I opened her messages. I was having a talk with an unfamiliar man. They had been conversing for some time, and based on what I've read, it was obvious that this was more than just light-hearted banter. Late-night texts, flirtatious messages, and even a few suggestive remarks about observing the relationship's development were all present. I didn't identify the guy who sent me the initial message that drew my attention. They had been exchanging pleasant banter, but it was more than that. She wasn't blocking his flirtatious texts, which called her names like cute and baby. Rather, she was supporting it by replying with emojis of laughter and phrases like, "You're too much." One of his messages said, "I am eager to meet you once more." I felt repulsed. I only needed to see that. She wasn't the only one considering an open relationship. She had already begun to investigate it. Setting the phone down, I turned to face her. Already in tears, she muttered something about it being only talking and not what it appeared to be. "Stop," I said. Lying no longer served any purpose. "So, this concept of an open partnership wasn't just a theory, was it?" I inquired. "You had previously given it a try." She winced. Her breath caught in her throat. No, it wasn't the case. Her words tumbled over one another as she spoke rapidly. All I was doing was chatting to him. It wasn't serious. I mean, that was an error. A foolish error. An error. I raised my voice. "You were conversing, flirting, and planning with him, and you want me to think that was only an error?" "Yes, it was," she sobbed. "I didn't intend for it to go. I was simply wondering. I don't want to lose you because I adore you." I gave her a furious look. "You've already lost me." Flatly, I replied. "The moment you believed that involving someone else in this was acceptable." "Into us?" "I was lost by you. Please," she pleaded, "don't let this stop because of one careless error, please." "I'll stop at nothing to make this right." For a little period, I saw her crumble, yet the rage in my chest persisted. "You made a decision." Silently, I responded, "I'm making mine." "We're finished." Although I was angry on the inside, I maintained my composure because we were in public. It was enough for me to leave her when she even entertained the notion when we were engaged. She continued saying she was sorry, but I didn't want to listen. After telling her I was finished, I got up and walked out of the cafe. I experienced a bizarre jumble of feelings as I left, including relief, grief, rage, and even a slight enlightenment. She sat there sobbing and attempting to justify herself as I watched. However, those were not the type of tears that seemed genuine. She appeared to be in a panic, frantically trying to regain control of the situation. She seemed to be practicing what she was going to say in an attempt to get my forgiveness. It was only conversation. She continued, but her tone was inconsistent with what she was saying. Her speech was devoid of genuine remorse. Just be afraid. Fear of the repercussions. Fear of solitude. Fear of being deprived of our comforts. And I knew I couldn't do this any longer as I gazed at her. Whatever she said, the harm was already done. I understood exactly where I stood for the first time in weeks. Whatever we had, I wasn't going to let her mess with my feelings or drag me through the muck. After that meeting in the cafe, it was over. I assumed that was the end of it. That same evening, I removed her from all social media and banned her number. I didn't want to know what she was doing, see her, or even hear from her. For a few days, I felt at peace and finished. She made no attempt to get in touch, and at last, I began to feel as though I could go on. Then suddenly I started getting texts from our common acquaintances. Most of them were apologizing after hearing what had transpired in the cafe. Word must have spread about the man she was speaking to, because others who had previously supported her started to turn against her. I was informed by one of her acquaintances that she had begun dating the man immediately following our separation. It didn't surprise me. By now, it was clear that she had been positioning him in the background. However, I was somewhat aback by how rapidly things went wrong for her. It seems she was trying to portray him as the ideal new partner by sharing photos of him on social media. According to mutual acquaintances, it seemed forced, as if she was making an excessive effort to show something. "When you find someone who truly understands you," was the caption on one of her posts. This seemed to be a jab at me. It was comical, though, since nobody was buying it. After they criticized her for moving on so quickly, a few friends even informed me that she blocked them. The post then ended a week later. No more images, no more adorable captions. Radio silence. At that point, she was going crazy as rumors began to circulate that he had abandoned her. She was telling folks about how he took advantage of her and led her on. To be honest, though, I wasn't shocked. She didn't know how to deal with it. It was as if karma had come to collect. I didn't feel sorry for her when I learned about this. You may call it petty, but it seemed like karma at work. You can't expect things to go as planned if you treat people the way she treated me. That isn't how life operates. After that, several of our common acquaintances began to distance themselves from her. They said that she had been playing the victim, spreading false information about me, and acting toxically. It was pure bullshit when she told folks that I was manipulating and didn't appreciate her. Fortunately, the majority of our friends were able to see through it, particularly after learning that she had slept with someone else the day after our split. It's amazing how fast people change their minds when the truth is revealed. Several of my pals who had previously advised me that I had overreacted were now apologizing profusely. They acknowledged that they were mistaken to have doubted me and claimed to have been unaware of how seriously twisted up the issue was. I assured them that was all right, but to be honest, it was nice to have their backing once more. After I blocked her, she attempted to phone me from other numbers. She must have changed her mind and decided she wanted me back after the guy dumped her. She said in her voicemail that she understood how much she loved me and that she was prepared to make amends. I didn't answer. I didn't even consider answering. I was really over it by then. There was no turning back from the fact that she was completely different from who I had assumed her to be. Cutting connections was more than simply a technological decision after everything that transpired. It was about getting rid of her completely, mentally and physically. I packed the last of her belongings. Many of her belongings were still strewn all over the flat, even though she had grabbed the necessities the night before she left. The closet's contents, the bathroom's toiletries, little stuff at random, similar to her preferred coffee cup. She also kept a few books on the nightstand at all times. It seemed strangely emotional to pack everything up. Everything seemed to serve as a reminder of the life we had created together, and I briefly questioned whether I was being too severe. However, all second-guessing vanished as I remembered the cafe and the texts I had seen on her phone. From a burner, I sent her a text. First of all, she was instructed to pick up her belongings by the end of the week, or it will be sent to Goodwill because she didn't have any saved. 2 days later, she appeared as though she had been sobbing. I refused to allow her in. At the door, I gave her the boxes, said her farewell, and shut it. She didn't dispute, didn't make an effort to get in. She seemed to want to say something, but she simply stayed there for a moment before walking away. I didn't see her in person again after that. There were still unresolved issues to resolve after that. I went through everything and canceled or changed the passwords for the few memberships and accounts that she and I shared. Netflix, Spotify, even the bills for utilities. Everything that bound us together had to go. My intention was not to be petty. All I wanted was a fresh start. Dealing with shared friends was the most difficult aspect. After everything was revealed, some of them had already severed their relationship with her, while others were still attempting to maintain their neutrality. I understand. There was no middle ground for me. Yet they didn't want to choose sides. I didn't want you in my life if you were still seeing her after everything. I made it clear to a select individuals that if they were still connected to her, I didn't feel comfortable being friends. The most of them comprehended. However, a few folks pretended that I was exaggerating. One buddy said, "You can't just erase 5 years like it never happened." However, that was precisely what I had to do. I began cutting my circle down one by one. It has nothing to do with punishing somebody. I was trying to protect myself. I was not interested in hearing about her, get updates on her life, or view her in tagged photographs. A common acquaintance told me a few weeks later that she was still talking about me fabricating tales to make herself appear to be the victim. She cleverly omitted the fact that she was already chatting to another guy when she told others that I had overreacted and embarrassed her. On my back, I let it roll off. I had no interest in repairing the record or clearing my name. The truth was already known by those who mattered and by anybody else. Whatever they wanted to believe, they could. Finally, the commotion subsided. Conversations and messages from individuals attempting to mediate or explain ceased mentioning her name. She seemed to simply disappear into the backdrop. To be honest, that was all I ever desired.